continue on in this idea of darkness and light, and I've got some scriptures. This is the scripture for this first Sunday of 2022, which is the second Sunday after Christmas. It's John 1, and I want to read some of it. I put it on the screen so we could just follow along this morning. And there's maybe it sounds a little coded. Maybe it sounds some words that we don't use or whatever. So I'll kind of stop, and just explain some of it maybe in our own idioms. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John, the elder apostle, the only one who lived into his old age, although he was exiled from the larger state, he did live into old age, and he was not killed. And he's saying, in the beginning, and where's the last time that you heard a book start with "in the beginning"? Genesis. Thank you, Ed. In the beginning was the Word, and we're capitalizing it because we're calling Jesus the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word, Jesus, was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him. All. He was creator. And apart from him, not even one thing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of mankind, or humankind, or people. The life was the light of us. And that light shines in darkness, and the darkness did not grasp it. Neither could it touch it, neither could it snuff it out, neither could it understand it. And that light that is in us, that we persist in a world that contains darkness, in a world that's full of darkness, is amazing. Life continues to persist, and we continue to make it in the face of the most dire circumstances. Each of our lives have those. Each generation faces those new situations that they have to figure out. We are in the midst of trying to figure this one out. And that light continues to shine, that light that comes through Jesus. And let's just personify the darkness for a minute. The darkness couldn't snuff it out, couldn't touch it, can't understand it. How is it that you continue to persist and make it? How is it that you continue to overcome? How is it that you continue to have that little spark of flame where you can get up and keep going? Because, the world's full of darkness, and it would be easy to quit. But how is it that people continue to go? A man came, we're talking about John the Baptist, one sent from God, and his name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. This was the true light that, coming into the world, enlightens every person. John's getting a little heavy with the same words over and over again. He was in the world, Jesus, the Word, and the world came into being through him, and yet the world did not know him. Why would John call him the Word in the way he's writing right now? We're talking about light. We said in the beginning, let there be light. And how did God accomplish creation? Did he struggle for it? Did he work for it? Was it a labor for him to create? No. He just spoke it. He said it, and it happened. And it's really interesting because when we talk about the preaching aspect, the silly aspect of me standing up here and talking, that kind of, like, that's not really a whole lot, but somehow the preaching, when the gospel roots itself in you and you start to fan it, it changes things. Like the spoken word is a really big deal. And it's the way that we are to see God creating the world. He speaks it without effort. Verse 11, he came to his own, meaning he came into his own culture. He had a culture, he had a people, he had friends and family, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, grandparents. On that little section, Palestine, he came to his own, and his own people did not accept him. Good Friday, right? But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of a man, but of God. Of course, all of us were born of blood, yes. Of course, all of us were born because two people made a baby. Of course, humans chose the will, a choice to make a baby. He's bypassing all that and said, yeah, that's all the case. But let's focus on what's primary. That we are being born in a different way, and now we understand clarity, light has been brought to us, that we are first and foremost children of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And if you've been here for a while, you know that dwelt means he pitched his tent next to us. He built a tent next to our tent. He moved into the house next door to our house. And we saw his glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace. John the Baptist testified about him and called out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who is coming after me has proved to be my superior, because he existed before me." John's saying that this Jesus, who was born, lived, died, resurrected, existed before him. For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. We should paint that on the wall. No one has seen God at any time. God, the only Son, who is in the arms of his Father, he has explained him. That's the reading of the gospel for us this morning. And we join in many other congregations around the world in reading that section of the Gospel of John this Sunday morning. Follow along with me. I want to do a short history lesson. And if you stick with me, I think I'll be able to sort of throw that line out, that line out, that line out. And at the very end, pull the string and it'll all come together. At least that's what I'm going to attempt to do. Okay. This is a short little history insight so that we might see our location today. That's all good. What we just read is all good. But what's one thing that means for where we're living or how we're living today? I can say all that. It's very spiritual, and I have some intense connections with it, and it helps me understand past, present, future, all these kinds of stuff. My worth, my value, your worth, your value. But let's put shoes on the ground. Let's look at what that could possibly mean. You know that on Christmas Eve, we spoke briefly that in the Bible, there aren't colors. We have color words, red, blue, black, green, yellow, whatever. Turquoise, chartreuse. Anybody familiar with chartreuse? Did I win? Okay, yeah. There's a color called chartreuse. We have words for these, but in the Bible, they don't have words for those. They name the words by the object. So what we would say, there's a black stone. Well, in the Old Testament, they would have just said the name of that stone, and we all would have understood what that color is. but we wouldn't have said black, right? Or if blood comes out and we call it blue or black or red, we wouldn't have used those words. We would have just said, hey, that looks like blood. Does that make sense? The sky is blue, but they would have just said, sky, things like that. This looks brown. They wouldn't have said that. They would have said bark, right? This looks like bark. This looks like the bark of a tree. We're there, okay. So when in our own heritage, the way that all of us who are in this room have come to this place this morning, there are some things that we need to discuss about how we live with truth and justice and love based on light and darkness and color. So, when we speak of light and darkness in the Bible, darkness is not a color. If you were here on Christmas Eve, when we lit candles around the room, you'll remember that darkness is not a color. Darkness is a lack of clarity. The world that God made, he still loves it. It's good. He's going to redeem it. He's going to rebuild it and renew it. The world isn't dark. It's that there is darkness in the world. There's lack of clarity. We can't see. We can't understand. Oftentimes we feel dumb. We can't figure it out. Why does it feel like I'm banging my head against a brick wall every time I try to do this? Or all these. Hello? Is that battery? No? Okay. I get stuck in. We're gonna pause just a minute, okay? My secret stash of batteries. I mean, what other church? What other church? Can you see someone open the wall behind them, pull out secret batteries, and make that change as quickly as I did?
Leave it in the recording though, so the people at home get the full experience.
I was thinking about cutting it, but Alan, I will not.
Yeah, let them have the full experience.
You got it. So darkness is not a color. Darkness is a fogginess that we walk through in life, where sometimes we make mistakes and we didn't even know it. I mean, that's how foggy and cloudy life can be. And even when we get onto something, there are still things in our past that we're kind of stuck on, and maybe we don't even know it yet. And however you want to describe how you grow and mature, or your own spiritual formation, the light that Jesus brings is like a flashlight or a lantern or a candle, so that we can see in the darkness. We can see in the fogginess, the mistiness, the cloudiness. And sometimes he turns that light onto our own hearts so that we can see things that we didn't know were there, or we can gain clarity and understanding on something. On a wound or something in the past, and that clarity, all of a sudden realizing it, having Jesus shed his light on it, doesn't necessarily make it all better, but actually just that light on it, and now we have understanding, gives us like some renewed energy, some renewed strength to move on, even though that's there. The light gives us clarity. Okay. So in our location, and I'm going to invite you, once again, stick with me. In our location, in life, the way that we live, how we came literally to this ground right here, and how we live. About 500 years ago, people started dividing or oppressing or abusing others based upon skin color. And you're like, well, didn't people fight before? Yes, they did. Weren't there conflicts? And didn't people oppress other folks? One group oppresses another group, or here's a war or a fight. Yes, they did. But it wasn't based upon what your skin looks like. It was based on other things, maybe. Maybe where a boundary marker should be. Or it was based upon religious conflict. Or based upon whose section of the river is this? Or we speak one language and you speak another language, and there's some things that we want, that we both want, and we can't work it out, so we have a conflict. But there wasn't this consciousness of skin color. There wasn't. I know that's hard to think, like to unpeel that out of your mind, because we grow up with an extreme awareness of skin color. What happened what happened was there were some, I feel, I'm going to go for it. I need a little confidence myself. Here's how it went down. This is why this happened. There were some Portuguese folks who owned land and owned businesses. And some Jewish folks from the east were starting to move in to Portugal. And they had acquired some wealth. And they had acquired some land. And the Portuguese, they were becoming upset and feeling threatened by the rise of the influence and the power and the families of the Jewish people that came into their area. And so instead of trying to sort it out by nobles and families and things like and kings and things like that, they were at this point where they started writing laws down. And all of a sudden, you'll see that a switch occurred. They started writing laws that excluded Jewish people. And they started practicing that. They gained a little experience in doing this. Oh, if we can write the laws of the land to benefit us and exclude these folks, then we don't actually have to touch them and have conflict. We don't actually have to have, in most cases, we don't actually have to fight them and have conflict. We can exclude them and raise our own position by what we write and tell everybody that this is the law of the land. And it went from groups having conflict with one another and trying to sort it out, and sometimes people killed each other and sometimes they didn't, to now how we live and how we treat each other is now written in documents that everybody is supposed to follow. And when they made that switch, they started gaining practice. They started practicing, and they started learning how to exclude people by what's written down in law books and what's said in courtrooms and how things are divided and settled supposedly in a peaceful manner through judges and magistrates. Okay, these Portuguese folks, they started learning that in their hometown, but they also started building these larger ships that can, and I know you're like, what is Josh doing here this morning? They started building these larger ships that they could travel further distances on oceans and seas. And they made their way over to Africa, not very far for them. And they noticed that there were these people that were living there that had dark skin, and they weren't Jewish, they weren't Muslim, they weren't Catholic, they weren't Christian. There wasn't any recognizable religious label to put on them, and they didn't seem to have what the Portuguese thought were understandable religious practices, or they didn't seem to organize themselves like the Portuguese did, and so they used a word, and they called them heathen. Now, have you heard that word before? Okay. So these groups that are written down as formal groups in the law books, well, oh my goodness, here's a group over here that they don't even fit any category we have. And then they notice, well, they have conflict with one another. There's nothing written down. Why don't we exploit that conflict between them? Why don't we, they noticed that, okay, when one group in Africa, the places that they were, when one group is fighting and they take captive some prisoners, those prisoners of the conflict in the group that won become members of their society. Only they're a little bit, they don't get their own families, but they become part of other families. And so they see this and they say, hey, we have some of this stuff. Do you think that some of the people that you've captured, could we take them back home? And they did. And they started working in people's houses. And so while we talk a lot here about the gospel being the salvation of our souls, the redemption of our hearts, the new heaven and earth, that Jesus is our friend and Savior, the gospel also sheds light not just on the darkness in our lives, but the gospel sheds light on the systems and the structures that put people in places that exclude them from experiencing all the natural goods of the world that we should all be entitled to, because we're created in the image of God. We live in God's world. He made all of the natural goods for everybody. And so if we just say, oh, Jesus saved my soul, which is true. Jesus is my constant companion. He is my constant dialogue partner. That is true. That's actually, and I'm going to say this for theatrical purposes, that's actually not the whole gospel. The whole gospel is that all of the princes and all the principalities and all the systems and all the structures, whether they live in our tiny little hearts or whether they're unseen in their ways that control the world, as if you can write something down on a law book and separate people to make one lower and one higher, I can't touch that. Just like I can't touch your soul. But the gospel shines light on that and says, didn't I make light that was the light of all humankind? And if other humans are some humans are keeping other humans from experiencing the light that comes through the world, the gospel of Jesus Christ is opposed to that. So why would I share all of these things? That's actually the beginning of the slave trade. That's the beginning of the African slave trade. That's how it happened. Some folks got some boats. They practiced on excluding Jews that they were aware of. They came upon some people who didn't fit any categories, and so they called them atheists. They called them heathens. The proper posture would have been, if they were truly interested in the gospel, where can I see God moving in your lives already? Well, so these folks that are heathens, atheists, they start to view them, treat them, and write it into the law books that they become less than human. So you can line them up, hose them down, right? They're not. I mean, these are Christian folks that did this. Put them in ships, layer them in ships, send them across the ocean. Just knowing that there's going to be a percentage of loss on the way, just part of doing business. And right in that moment, it switched from when people have conflicts, one person wins, one person loses, which is unfortunate that that's the world in its broken state. That there was still life, human life, even if it was more difficult for the conquered people. 2, the conquered people are not people anymore. We can buy and sell them. And in fact, they'll do a lot of work that'll make a lot of money for the kings and queens in the church in Europe. So why would I take all this time to go into that? Well, let's say, and I'm just kind of going to make this up, but let's say that you read in the Muncie paper, and I'm not going to get into any details. You read a headline in the Muncie paper of a person who got into a bar fight and actually won the fight, and the other person has some lasting injuries from that. And then the next article you scroll through, a person molested a child. That's in the paper. The paper likes to print that because we click on it, right? You print things like that. What? And you click on it. And so they get more views from the bad stuff. We always want to click on the bad stuff and know more about that. So more people read it, and that's what they give us. You click on that, and you're like, okay. It's interesting. This person damaged a child in the most traumatic way, and he is going to serve 10 months in jail. You can do it right here. This other person got in a bar fight, some bones got broken, blah, blah, blah. He's got 10 years. Let me ask you, which person's white and which person's black? And we don't need to scroll through the paper to know that we bring a racialized view into the world. And unfortunately, those things that the Portuguese learned on the Jews, the new world here has learned to do that with minorities. And it's still in the darn law. It's still in the law of the land. And friends, this is not the gospel. And if we are about being freed from oppression and being set free from the things that entangle us personally, the next step is to say the systems and the structures that keep one people up and push other people down, which I just explained to you how it happened in probably the most concise way I've ever done. It's the same. It's in the law. It's in the systems. It's in the structures. And the gospel speaks to that. And the light of the world says, no, the light of the world. And I can say, yes, Jesus will, he will pull all things up that need to be pulled up and pull down all things that need to be pulled down. But he's not going to change that. Like if these things that are written into our ways of living, into our culture, that keep minorities from experiencing the natural goods of life, or they have unequal protection under the law, like Jesus isn't going to change that. If anybody's going to change that, it's going to be us. Like, I've heard you say, we're his hands and his feet. So, he's not going to sprinkle magic in Delaware County and things all of a sudden get better. Like, if we really believe about everyone being created, but when he spoke, and the light that he contains perpetually within him, given to spark each of your lives and bring you out of the dust. If we really believe those things, and that we were blind prior to this, but because of Jesus, light is being shed, and so we understand these things now, it's going to be us that does the changing. Like, if we want all of our neighbors to be treated fairly throughout the whole community, you and I and other people around Muncie and Delaware County, we will have to be the ones that are doing the changing. Just like you can write policies, that exclude one person and raise another person, you can also write policies. We can also make laws. We can also make changes that are the best attempt we can at giving everyone equal protection, fairness, treatment under the law. That just so happens to be the second focus, the second goal, our current values, what we're working toward in Indiana, in the United Methodist Church. Lots of denominations, lots of churches, that's fine. We happen to be just of the covenant of the United Methodist Church in Indiana. We're our own thing here in Indiana. And that second one is dismantling racism. It is good for us as individuals to sit and to listen to people who are different from us. We need to build relationships. We need to learn from one another. From those who have been treated poorly by our culture and systems and structures, and also individually, those who are in the majority group, they need to listen. We just need, if you look like me, you just need to shut your mouth and listen. But again, that's not the whole deal. That's not me and you and someone who is different from you forming a relationship. That causes changes in our lives. That causes changes for good. We learn and we grow and we form. We recognize that Jesus isn't white. That he looks more, really he looks more like the people who do not receive fair treatment under the laws of the land. But that's not going to, eventually someone's going to say, okay, so what? It's great that we know each other. It's great that we learn. Like, what are the big changes that need to happen? And it's not the gospel unless it's for all the peoples of the earth. Yes, it's for you and me. But we are not experiencing the fullness of its power and its weight and the message and the freedom, the gloriousness, the invigoration of being filled with the Holy Spirit and having eyes to see It is for all the peoples. The good news. God is for all the peoples of the earth. And if you are someone who says, I'm a disciple of Jesus, then we have to conform to the views of Jesus. And in conforming to the views of Jesus, we have to come to see every single person as made in his image, just like us. And we have to come to see that when we get together, we can do some bad stuff and create some structures that you can't touch or you can't see, but we all know it. Wink, wink, buddy, buddy, elbow. And Jesus is opposed to the proud. Not just like he doesn't care for it, or he's upset about it. He is opposed to the proud. Meek and mild, tender, sweet baby Jesus is opposed to the proud. Jimmy, come up and play. So we're going to take communion today. We're not going to do the full liturgy as we sometimes do. This morning, could someone grab me a glove from downstairs? I forgot it. It's in the drawer underneath the microwave. Thank you. This morning, we're going to take communion. In that, this participation in bread, and for us it's grape juice, is an invitation to living in a new group, an invitation to live in a new brotherhood, a new sisterhood. It's sort of a statement that I'm interested in the grace and the light and the fellowship. I may not even know much about it, and that's fine. You don't have to know much at all. I may not know much about it, but I'm interested in this group of people who are attempting to live like the new world has come, where everything's perfect, even though it ain't yet. I'm interested in joining this band of men, this band of women, across the world, throughout time, who see that the laying down of our lives for the fellowship of others is the path to victory. The laying down of our lives for the fellowship of others is the path to victory. In just a minute, I'm going to put my mask on, put my glove on, and then I'll hold